Good morning, everybody. Major breaking developments to tell you about in the abduction of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. So a lot happened overnight. Authorities.
The cover of night brought a flurry of sudden movement. Investigators pulled a person of interest into custody, only to let them walk free hours later, pivoting their entire focus to a single residence in Rio Rico, Arizona. This remote location sits roughly 60 miles south of the Tucson city limits, an isolated stretch of desert landscape. Both the Federal Bureau of Investigation and local sheriff's deputies descended on the property after an anonymous whisper suggested the missing woman was being held inside. Law enforcement agents meticulously combed through the premises, yet, as the dust settled, the search yielded absolutely no trace of her presence. Interestingly, the woman who owns the property did not put up walls. She immediately opened her doors, cooperating fully with the detectives probing the grounds. Speaking under the veil of darkness late last night, she revealed it was her own son-in-law who was briefly swept into custody. Meanwhile, a chilling technical anomaly emerged. At exactly 1:47 a.m., the surveillance camera on Guthrie's front porch simply died. The sky was clear, the power grid hummed perfectly, and tech logs showed zero glitches. The digital eye did not break. It was forcefully blinded. Behind those locked doors sat an 84-year-old woman, utterly isolated in the dead of night. When dawn finally broke, the house was a hollow shell. The true terror of this mystery lies far beyond the mere fact that a vulnerable senior evaporated from the affluent, serene streets of the Catalina foothills. The horror is buried in the digital footprint, a chronological map that offers terrifying glimpses of the truth while stubbornly withholding the rest. She was not someone who lived in the spotlight or courted controversy. She was a matriarch, deeply devoted to her grandchildren, her spiritual beliefs, and the quiet comfort of daily rituals. Her survival depended on a strict regimen of cardiac medication and a surgically implanted pacemaker, a device tethered invisibly to a mobile application. In a grim twist of fate, that very piece of medical technology would eventually hand detectives the most agonizingly exact piece of chronological evidence they possess. As twilight fell on January 31st, she made her way back to her sanctuary following a warm, unremarkable gathering with her loved ones. The heavy garage door rattled shut just minutes before 10 p.m., sealing her inside as the suburban streets drifted into a deep, peaceful slumber. There were no red flags, no creeping shadows. But deep into the witching hour, her electronic shield was abruptly severed. Exactly 41 minutes after the lens went black, her life-saving implant permanently dropped its Bluetooth tether. That haunting window of time between the death of the camera and the death of the signal is now the beating heart of this mystery. Detectives from Pima County, flanked by federal agents, swarmed the property with an intense urgency the moment the alarm was sounded. The sanctuary had been violently breached. Splintered wood and broken barriers told a story of a hostile, calculated invasion. Grainy security stills immortalized a phantom lurking in the pre-dawn darkness, a masked intruder burdened with a heavy pack and clutching what appeared to be a weapon. As the hours bled into days, sinister whispers of extortion began to leak out, demanding untraceable digital currency in exchange for her life. The bizarre communications spread like wildfire, transforming a local nightmare into a nationwide obsession, yet the detectives remained chillingly tight-lipped. They refused to be baited by sensational theories, anchoring their entire strategy to cold, hard forensic data. Her inner circle, including her daughter Annie, endured rigorous interrogations and digital audits before authorities formally stripped away the dark cloud of suspicion hovering over them. The county's top law enforcement officer, Sheriff Chris Nanos, stood before the cameras and definitively absolved the grieving relatives of any involvement. Yet, the psychological puzzle pieces refused to fit. What was the exact catalyst that killed the surveillance feed at that precise second? What triggered the medical implant to sever its link shortly after? And what kind of predator sends demands for money to news anchors instead of the terrified family? Above all, what unspeakable events unfolded within those walls during that agonizing 41-minute void? This is not a tale spun from suburban gossip. It is a labyrinth constructed from digital timestamps, ghostly camera frames, medical logs, and a terrifying lack of logic. To this day, the 84-year-old has vanished without a trace, and the halls of justice remain empty of any formal suspects. The hunt is far from cold. In this deep dive, we strip away the chaotic news banners to examine the raw, unfiltered truth. We will meticulously reconstruct the fragments of evidence, step by step, attempting to illuminate the pitch-black morning of February 1st. Within that dreadful pocket of time between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m., a sequence of actions took place that irreversibly altered the trajectory of a human life. Until light is shed upon that terrifying blind spot, the ultimate reality of her fate stays locked in the shadows. The night of January 31st began with the comforting rhythm of habit. She dined with her loved ones, acting out a familiar script she had perfected over decades. Retreating to her enclave in the Catalina foothills, she sealed the garage slightly before 10 p.m., ending an evening devoid of any tension or foreboding omens. Not a single argument echoed through the cul-de-sac, the dispatch lines remained silent, and adjacent homes noticed nothing out of the ordinary. It was a portrait of absolute, mundane tranquility. And it is precisely that suffocating normalcy that makes the ensuing nightmare so deeply disturbing. At 84, she resided in solitary independence, occupying an immaculate property tucked into a highly secure, affluent development just north of the city. It is a community famous for sprawling mountain vistas and manicured lawns, a place completely insulated from the violent realities of overnight abductions. Her physical fragility demanded a life of unwavering discipline, battling a chronic cardiovascular condition with a strict regimen of pills. Buried beneath her skin was a pacemaker, constantly streaming data to a digital application. That invisible, life-saving tether was absolute. Providing she stayed within a few feet of her cellular device, the heart monitor pulsed its steady rhythm to the cloud. She was a woman anchored by unwavering, clockwork habits. So, when the sun rose and her digital icon failed to log into her customary Sunday service stream, a sudden, cold panic gripped her family. Nancy was a woman of rigid routines. Vanishing into thin air was entirely out of character for her. Her phone rang endlessly into the void, met only with a chilling, absolute silence. A creeping sense of dread quickly escalated into full-blown panic. Law enforcement was dialed in, setting a frantic search into motion. The moment deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department pulled up to her driveway, the grim reality of the situation took hold. The property bore the unmistakable, violent scars of a night that was anything but peaceful. Detectives would later confirm what the initial patrol instinctively felt. The main entrance had been violently breached, the door bearing the heavy hallmarks of a desperate forced entry. Hidden deep within the early morning digital shadows, security lenses caught something unnerving, a faceless, masked phantom prowling the perimeter of the estate. At precisely 1:47 in the morning, the front door lens went dead. That sudden, deliberate plunge into darkness would become the crucial temporal anchor of the entire manhunt. As dawn broke over the area, a far more sinister digital trail began to quietly weave itself together. Her life-sustaining pacemaker digitally tethered to her mobile device severed its Bluetooth link at roughly 2:28 in the morning. That fatal disconnection told a terrifying story. She had been physically dragged out of signal range. Between the sudden blinding of the security feed and the final heartbeat transmission, there rests a haunting void. 41 agonizing minutes of absolute, unrecorded terror. Desperate to illuminate that pitch-black timeline, detectives immediately descended upon the neighborhood, knocking on doors and hunting for any stray pixel of evidence. A massive digital dragnet was cast over the area, sweeping up feeds from local porches, quiet storefronts, and silent intersection lenses. Locals were urged to scrub through their personal archives, not just for the early hours of January 31st, but reaching as far back as January 11th to spot the ghost before it struck. This calculated backward glance revealed a chilling hypothesis. The predator had likely been stalking the property, quietly watching his prey for weeks before making a move. When Sheriff Chris Nanos finally stepped before the microphones, his tone was gravely controlled, officially confirming the community's worst nightmare. Nancy had been violently abducted. The local jurisdiction was no longer operating alone. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had been pulled into the shadows to hunt alongside them. Pleading for any legitimate whispers from the public, the department took a desperate gamble. Just days later, chilling stills extracted from the compromised security feeds were thrust into the media spotlight. The grainy frames revealed a nightmare wrapped in black attire, a fully obscured figure clutching a heavy satchel, moving with horrific purpose. Analysts studied the phantom's geometry, estimating the suspect stood somewhere between 5 feet 9 and 5 feet 10 inches, possessing a terribly ordinary, unremarkable frame. A deadly glint in the footage strongly suggested the intruder was heavily armed. Once those haunting visuals hit the airwaves, a quiet local mystery exploded into a nationwide obsession. The press descended like a storm, turning a quiet neighborhood tragedy into an endless loop of breaking news and relentless speculation. Behind the scenes, the investigative lens zoomed out, realizing the true narrative began long before the night the victim actually vanished. Cyber technicians ripped into the doorbell's coding, hunting for the truth. Was the system's sudden blackout a manual sabotage or a sophisticated digital jam? Every digital footprint she left behind was forensically dissected. Cell phone pings and cardiac telemetry were painstakingly woven together to chart her final known moments down to the exact second. The physical landscape finally offered a grim clue when a discarded glove was discovered roughly 2 miles down the desolate road from the crime scene. While the laboratory prepped the fabric for microscopic biological extraction, detectives remained frustratingly tight-lipped, refusing to officially bind the ominous discovery to the abduction. Just as the trail seemed to cool, a dark twist injected itself into the narrative. Clandestine digital whispers demanding extortion payouts in untraceable crypto coins. Suddenly, a straightforward home invasion morphed into a convoluted psychological maze, violently twisting the entire direction of the manhunt. The demands were chaotic, some insisting on Bitcoin transfers deep within the digital underground, while others brazenly filtered through the hands of ravenous journalists. Officials begrudgingly acknowledged the ransom chatter, yet immediately threw water on the fire, warning the desperate masses about the cruel influx of digital charlatans and fabricated leads. As with any heavily publicized nightmare, pathological liars and opportunists clouded the waters. The real war for detectives became filtering the genuine terror from the absolute static. Trapped in a living purgatory, her devastated relatives stepped up to the podium, begging a faceless public for any shred of salvation. Her daughter, Nancy Guthrie, leveraged her immense broadcasting reach to beam a desperate plea across the nation. A staggering bounty was placed on the Phantom's head, up to $1 million pooled by the family, bolstered by an additional federal incentive. The broadcasted ultimatum carried a singular, heavy demand. Step forward with absolute truth and walk away wealthy. As the first agonizing week bled away, the sheriff's department dropped another crucial piece into the sprawling puzzle. Those closest to the victim had been put under the investigative microscope, their alibis tested, their hardware stripped of every intimate digital secret. Intrusive legal mandates had authorized deep sweeps of their private lives, ultimately washing their names clean of the horrific deed. Sheriff Nanos took the microphone to definitively shield her bloodline from the suspect list, sharply reprimanding internet sleuths for dealing in cruel, baseless slander. Yet, the dark corners of the internet refused to listen. Amateur detectives swarmed the message boards, obsessively tearing apart the official chronology of that fateful night. Armchair analysts aggressively zoomed in on the murky footage, desperate to extract a name or a face from the heavily degraded pixels of the Phantom. The digital echo chambers relentlessly pounded on one agonizing detail: the vast, terrifying silence stretching between the dead security feed and the final fading heartbeat. Shutting out the digital noise, the professionals kept their eyes locked entirely on the physical truth, steadily pushing the boundaries of their grid outward into the desert. They scoured miles of asphalt through the mechanical eyes of commercial storefronts and distant traffic intersections, hunting for a getaway car. Whispers recently leaked from the investigation pointed to a nearby porch lens that caught a phantom vehicle tearing through the quiet streets right as the timeline went dark. While the brass refused to officially tie the speeding ghost car to her violent extraction, the relentless pursuit for answers forged onward without pause. In those frantic initial hours, tactical nerve centers hummed with an almost blinding intensity. Boots hit the ground in endless waves, desperate to cheat time and pull her back from the abyss. Investigators sifted through a mountain of leads, but the grim truth lingered beneath every file. Nancy Guthrie had vanished into the night. Handcuffs remained empty, and formal accusations had yet to be drawn. As the frantic initial search evolved into a grueling, methodical hunt, A single, chilling question crystallized. Were they looking at a carefully orchestrated hunt, a deliberate breach of sanctuary, or merely a fatal collision of chance? The key to unraveling this nightmare lies buried within 41 agonizing minutes, the silent void between 1:47 and 2:28 in the morning. Precisely at 1:47 a.m., the digital eye watching over the front porch went permanently blind. Forensics would soon determine this blackout was no mere glitch. Not a single power fluctuation had been registered on that street. The skies were perfectly clear, and the hardware had been operating flawlessly mere hours prior. The feed did not fail, it was severed. In the span of a few hours, that solitary anomaly dragged the classification of the incident from a routine missing person into the terrifying realm of a kidnapping. Experienced homicide detectives facing a puzzle of this magnitude ignore speculation. Instead, they anchor themselves to the chronology. The mechanics of the crime must be mapped. Action, reaction, alteration. The absolute beginning of this timeline was locked at 9:50 at night. That was the exact moment Nancy Guthrie's garage door rumbled shut following a familial visit. The subsequent anchor dropped at 1:47 a.m., marking the abrupt death of the surveillance feed. The final chronological stake was driven in around 2:28 a.m. when the internal rhythm of her pacemaker vanished from her phone's tracking log. Trapped between those digital markers is a 41-minute abyss, a terrifying blind spot completely devoid of electronic oversight. This specific stretch of missing time is incredibly disturbing when weighed against the standard psychology of home invasions. Typically, the calculated destruction of a recording device is the immediate prelude to a violent strike. Intruders rely on blistering pace and ruthless efficiency. Hovering in the shadows for nearly 3/4 of an hour is a glaring anomaly. While law enforcement has closely guarded the gruesome reality of the interior crime scene, they have conceded two chilling facts. The perimeter was violently breached, and Nancy did not leave that house willingly. Yet, the surrounding suburban silence remained unbroken, with no official records of nearby residents reporting so much as a scream. The street seemingly swallowed the event whole. No credible witness emerged to testify about idling vehicles or suspicious, lingering movements in the dark. Stripped of eyewitness testimony, the detectives were forced to rely on the cold, unblinking truth of digital forensics. Nancy's medical implant offered a macabre but perfect timestamp. The instant her heart monitor severed its digital tether at roughly 2:28 a.m., it painted a grim picture. Either the mobile device had been abandoned or the victim had been dragged entirely out of proximity. This solitary data point radically shrank the window of opportunity, while simultaneously birthing a terrifying new set of unknowns. With the visual feed executed at 1:47 a.m., and the medical connection dying 41 minutes afterward, one is forced to wonder, what psychological torment unfolded within those walls? Official agencies have maintained absolute silence regarding theories, though they acknowledge the horrifying reality of that missing time frame. Investigators dissect these dead zones with surgical precision, calculating the exact seconds required to smash through a barrier, subdue a target, and vanish into the night. They must weigh alternative motives against the clock, questioning if the perpetrator prowled the halls for hidden wealth or meticulously dismantled secondary alarms, constantly benchmarking the behavior against the dark histories of past predators. The electronic footprint is equally scrutinized. Did the mobile device travel? Was its battery deliberately killed? Did it desperately try to ping a tower? Were phantom hands attempting to breach her private data, or were smart home peripherals systematically neutralized? The specifics of this cyber autopsy remain locked within evidence rooms, though authorities have admitted to a grueling excavation of her digital life. Concurrently, a chilling piece of visual evidence leaked to the masses: the grainy silhouette of a faceless prowler lurking near the property in the dead of night. Shouldering what appeared to be a heavy pack, the phantom's rough dimensions and stature were meticulously cataloged and broadcasted during press conferences. The cold glint of a weapon in their grasp screamed of lethal premeditation, yet a photograph is nothing but a frozen fraction of the truth. A snapshot proves a monster was at the door, but it cannot explain why. Driven by this void, the investigative net was cast wider, vacuuming up every bite of neighborhood tape, expanding their hunt far beyond the desperate hours of the initial vanishing. digging deep into the archives to unearth broad daylight recordings from the 11th of January, as well as crucial fragments from the 31st. This specific pivot in the investigation carried a terrifying implication. Law enforcement suspected the predator had been stalking their prey long before the strike. The psychology of a targeted hit dictates a period of obsessive observation, a phase where the assailant memorizes the ebb and flow of a victim's daily existence. They lurk in the periphery, cataloging the exact minute the bedroom windows go black, tracking the mundane rhythms of arrivals and departures. While authorities refuse to confirm if Nancy was the subject of a prolonged hunt, their hunger for historical footage proves they believe this horror story began long before the night she was taken. Then, a strange new discovery threw the already tangled web into deeper chaos. A solitary glove was recovered, abandoned roughly 2 miles from the primary crime scene in the agonizing days trailing the abduction. Crime scene technicians swiftly bagged the evidence for intensive biological scrutiny, but the glacial pace of genetic sequencing means the public remains entirely in the dark regarding any conclusive match. If the fabric is ultimately tied to the phantom at the door, it radically shifts the geographical footprint of the getaway, but until the laboratory speaks, this artifact is nothing more than a ghost of a clue waiting to be materialized. The investigation took a dark turn with sudden ransom demands. Whispers surfaced about digital ultimatums requiring cryptocurrency being linked to the disappearance. A few menacing threats explicitly demanded Bitcoin, while others seemed strategically leaked to the press. Detectives confirmed analyzing the digital notes, warning that highly publicized tragedies inevitably attract cruel hoaxes. It remains a grim reality. Phantom extortionists eagerly emerge whenever mysteries capture the nation's curiosity. The FBI's arrival stripped away any illusions, cementing the investigation's absolute gravity. Federal operatives deploy only for severe matters, signaling potential abductions, jurisdictional crossings, or complex cyber extortion. Off-grid, forensic cyber analysts quietly dissected digital ledgers, hunting for traces tied to the extortionists' supposed crypto wallets. Blockchains leave immutable scars. Even heavily obscured digital vaults can occasionally be unmasked through exchange touchpoints or financial rhythms. Subsequent leaks revealed one pinpointed account showed a mere trickle of movement, a baffling, stark contrast to the astronomical ransom demanded. This glaring inconsistency cast chilling doubts over the narrative's authenticity. Yet, paradoxes aren't proof. As days bled together, authorities tackled another toxic hurdle, the suffocating public suspicion surrounding the family. Warrants triggered rigorous raids. Devices were systematically drained of their buried secrets. Following relentless interrogations, Sheriff Chris Nanos addressed the glaring press lenses directly. He declared Nancy's inner circle, particularly her daughter Annie and extended kin, were entirely ruled out as suspects. Exonerating families demands bulletproof forensic review. Despite this official absolution, the web's dark corners continued churning with toxic, active theories. Armchair detectives tore the timeline to shreds, endlessly debating the suffocating void of that 41-minute gap. They debated the tactical logic of prematurely blinding a security feed if rapid speed was the intruder's primary goal. Authorities maintained glacial discipline. They widened civilian tip networks and meticulously dissected vehicular surveillance from neighboring streets. Emerging reports hinted at peripheral doorbell cameras capturing a vehicle tearing through pre-dawn streets mere moments from the suspected timeline. While investigators refused to officially anchor this phantom car to the crime, every fragile detail required meticulous weighing. When life hinges on mere minutes rather than hours, absolute precision becomes everything. 41 minutes is an eternity vast enough for a dozen horrific narratives. Yet, it remains paradoxically brief, making the dividing line between scenarios razor thin. Did this phantom breach the threshold the second the lens went dark, or was there palpable hesitation? Was a hidden accomplice waiting? And what horrors lay concealed within that canvas bag? Tools, sentimental items, or something entirely more sinister? Detectives maintain a suffocating silence regarding these psychological puzzles. What they have cemented is this chilling reality. Nancy Guthrie vanished sometime after 1:47 a.m. By 2:28 a.m., her cardiac device permanently severed its digital connection. Those are the cold mechanics of the event. Everything else must be painstakingly reconstructed from raw evidence, completely devoid of assumption. When the state bleeds frozen surveillance frames into the public domain, it is rarely an accidental maneuver. Each pixel is weaponized with absolute intent. The desperate goal remains brutally simple: unmask the phantom frozen in time. In Nancy Guthrie's haunting saga, visual breadcrumbs scattered by the Pima County Sheriff's Department depict a faceless silhouette prowling near her sanctuary before dawn. Swathed in pitch-black garments, the entity carries a dark satchel and is visibly brandishing a firearm. Declassifying those haunting stills violently altered the trajectory of the entire manhunt. The objective pivoted from abstract reconstruction to desperate identification. But a lifeless photograph remains utterly silent on predatory behavior. It proves mere existence. Therefore, specialized behavioral profilers must peer deeply beyond superficial layers of fabric and physical posture. They deconstruct the stalker's kinetic geometry, evaluating property approaches, moments of hesitation, perimeter scanning, and the razor-thin balance between urgent panic and calculated caution. Officially, authorities have kept the intricate choreography of the suspect's movements buried beneath redacted files. The only concrete revelation is the jarring death of the security feed at precisely 1:47 a.m. Crucially, the hooded apparition was immortalized on digital film mere seconds before that permanent blackout. This chronological sequence is absolutely paramount. Deliberately blinding an optical sentry practically screams of hyper-awareness. It is the hallmark of calculated premeditation rather than chaotic spontaneity. The intruder knew the lens was watching. They possessed a chilling understanding that it was silently recording them. The haunting enigma remains whether this technological sabotage was executed the instant their boots hit the pavement or following prolonged, quiet observation. Detectives dissect these micro-expressions with surgical care, cross-referencing spectral footage against historical cases, pulling in behavioral specialists when the darkness requires decoding. A subtle tilt of a frame can scream of intimate environmental familiarity or betray crippling uncertainty. Yet, that nondescript bag has truly mesmerized the profiling teams. Authorities deliberately thrust that specific detail into the spotlight during their desperate public plea for intelligence. A backpack isn't just an accessory. It's a calculated choice. It conceals the implements of a break-in, or serves as a vessel to haul away the quiet spoils of a crime scene. Yet, until those canvas walls are unzipped, the bag remains a haunting visual anomaly rather than a definitive piece of proof. The weapon glinting in the surveillance frame whispers a darker truth. This interloper came anticipating resistance. The gun was a promise of absolute control. Still, while we can catalog a phantom's arsenal, deciphering true malice proves infinitely more complex. As hours bled into days, detectives cast a wider net, pushing beyond the primary perimeter to scour adjacent streets and neighboring security feeds. Law enforcement urged the surrounding community to comb through their private video archives for highly specific windows of time. Their focus locked onto January 11th and fractions of January 31st. This peculiar request hints at a chilling theory. The victims were being watched, hunted in plain sight, long before the strike. Professional predators rarely operate on impulse. They meticulously stalk their prey, studying the ebb and flow of a household's daily life. They map out vulnerabilities, charting habits until the perfect, terrifying window presents itself. While authorities have kept quiet on this premeditation theory, the desperate hunt for historical footage betrays a vastly expanded scope. In the shadows of physical clues, invisible data drew a rigid timeline. The sudden severing of Nancy's pacemaker signal became the grim, undeniable endpoint. Blinding the porch lens marked the beginning of the nightmare. Trapped between that void and a silenced heartbeat, detectives navigate a labyrinth of educated guesses. Then, a solitary glove discovered roughly 2 miles from the threshold crashed into the narrative, injecting a deeply unsettling new puzzle piece. Officials quickly assured the public that rigorous laboratory scrutiny would unearth whether this discarded fabric belonged to the phantom. Genetic profiling is a cold, deliberate science. It holds the power to irrevocably tether a suspect to the horror or shatter a theory entirely. Yet, as official briefings currently stand, the silence from the crime lab is deafening. No concrete biological link has been shared. Adding a bizarre twist to the psychological thriller were murmurs of digital extortion, shadowy missives demanding cryptocurrency for her life. Investigators conceded they were tracking these sinister demands, yet swiftly reminded a captivated public that sensationalized tragedies attract opportunistic frauds. The modern era of true crime has bred a sickening trend. The moment a vanishing commands the national spotlight, bottom-feeding grifters emerge to monetize the agony. Subsequent journalistic digging unearthed a crucial detail. The digital ledger attached to one of these terrifying ultimatums sat virtually dormant. This stark lack of movement cast a heavy shadow of doubt, forcing everyone to ask if they were dealing with a mastermind captor or a heartless scavenger. Operating in this treacherous territory, task force members dissect every typed threat with extreme paranoia. Profilers tear apart the syntax, cyber specialists hunt encrypted routing, and veterans measure demands against known criminal signatures. Federal involvement brings the devastating weight of government cyber tracking. Amidst this technological hunt, local police publicly absolved the victim's immediate inner circle. Staring down a swirling storm of community rumors, Sheriff Chris Nano stepped up to sever the malignant gossip at its root. He made it unequivocally clear. Following exhaustive scrutiny, her daughter Annie, alongside other relatives, had been completely eradicated from the suspect board. While that declaration slammed the door on the family angle, it only deepened the surrounding abyss of unanswered horrors. Unlocking the psychology of a home invasion requires weighing a perpetrator's appetite for danger. Blinding a security lens is an inherently hazardous gamble. Stalking a quiet suburban threshold in the dead of night flirts with disaster. Lingering in the shadows for a staggering 41-minute gap borders on terrifying audacity. Yet, dancing on the razor's edge doesn't inherently prove a master plan, nor does it guarantee the reckless frenzy of an amateur. It merely confirms a chilling calculation. The intruder decided the prize was worth the threat of a cage. This forces detectives to map out terrifying hypotheticals. Was the ultimate target always the woman sleeping inside, or was this a property grab gone horribly wrong? Did something spook the phantom, cutting the invasion short, or did they linger? From there, the grim mathematics of logistics come into play. If that internal heart monitor violently severed its connection at precisely 2:28 in the morning, she was being pulled from her sanctuary. That abduction could have been frantic or agonizingly methodical. The precise yardage required to kill that digital heartbeat shifts dramatically based on the thickness of walls and structural interference. These cold, mechanical variables are far from trivial. They dictate the exact tragic moment she was spirited away from the safety of her grounds. When a crime bleeds into the cultural zeitgeist, the internet's insatiable hunger for resolution frequently sprints light years ahead of the actual forensics. Grainy screenshots go viral, armchair sleuths spin wild conspiracies, and desperate minds seek order. But the professionals orchestrating the manhunt walk a strictly regimented path. They remain immune to the allure of theatrical narratives. Their only master is the cold, unyielding threshold of evidentiary proof. Every scrap, the masked figure's garments, the ominous knapsack, the drawn pistol, the blinded optic, the silenced internal monitor, is laid bare. Add in the supposed digital extortion and the solitary cloth hand covering found miles away. Every artifact is logged and relentlessly pitted against the rest. Yet, for all their technological wizardry, the one critical piece missing from their public arsenal is a name to match the shadow. Fresh whispers in the press point to neighborhood lenses capturing a car tearing through the darkness, fleeing the vicinity within the exact fatal window. Task force leaders have quietly secured this speeding ghost car on tape, yet maintain an agonizing silence on whether it carried the predator. In a vanishing dictated by microscopic fractions of time, a fleeting set of headlights is either fate's cruel trick or the ultimate key. As this nightmare consumes national headlines, the machinery of justice shifts into a desperate overdrive. The moment the call came in regarding Nancy Guthrie's sudden disappearance, Pima County Sheriff's deputies descended upon the property, locking down the perimeter to preserve whatever secrets the scene still held. Within 24 hours, the scope of the mystery had far outgrown the confines of a single home, prompting authorities to erect centralized command posts. A relentless 24/7 rotation of personnel was activated, while specialized analysts were drafted in to sift through a mounting avalanche of fragmented clues. The Federal Bureau of Investigation officially entered the fray, unleashing an arsenal of elite federal resources and cutting-edge technical capabilities onto the puzzle. This rapid metamorphosis from a localized police response into a highly synchronized, multi-agency machine was a deeply calculated maneuver. When dealing with a suspected kidnapping, the relentless ticking of the clock governs everything, though urgency isn't strictly confined to those initial golden hours. It is entirely about how aggressively law enforcement can push out their dragnet, leading searchers to meticulously comb through every shadow of the Catalina foothills neighborhood. Investigators knocked on every door, urging locals to scrutinize their digital footprints, from doorbell lenses and driveway monitors to deeply embedded indoor surveillance systems. Their demands were chillingly precise, reaching far beyond the darkened early morning hours of February 1st. Authorities specifically requested video from targeted timeframes on both January 11th and January 31st, a hyper-specific detail that carries massive implications. Whenever detectives look backward into the weeks preceding a crime, it heavily implies a dark working theory. They are hunting for shadows of premeditated reconnaissance. They were looking for a phantom who had been quietly stalking the residents long before striking, though officials remained entirely tight-lipped about whether such surveillance was actually discovered. Yet, deliberately stretching that temporal net proves the investigation had fundamentally shifted away from a random crime of opportunity hypothesis. Tactical tracking teams flooded the surrounding wilderness, plunging into a sprawling, unforgiving terrain defined by rugged desert plains, isolated hiking trails, and loose, treacherous sand. These vast, desolate expanses are notorious for swallowing evidence and frustrating rescue efforts, necessitating a massive deployment of infantry units, logistical support, and eyes in the sky during those critical early phases. Tracking down every whispered clue demanded an agonizing level of orchestration, while behind the scenes, a completely silent, digital war was simultaneously unfolding. Cyber specialists tore into the electronic soul of Nancy's smartphone, hunting for anomalies hidden within system logins, deleted messages, and background application routines. They bypassed the consumer interface entirely, collaborating directly with the security camera's manufacturer to dissect the raw, back-end server logs in an attempt to understand exactly how the visual feed was so cleanly severed. The irony of contemporary surveillance is that even when a lens goes completely dark, the hardware itself silently logs the exact cause of its own demise. The forensics team needed to know, did human hands physically dismantle it? Was the electrical cord deliberately severed? Or did an intruder deploy a localized network jammer? In a true crime labyrinth, those microscopic distinctions mean everything, much like the chillingly personal biometric logs harvested from the victim's cardiac pacemaker. That abrupt, catastrophic severing of its Bluetooth uplink at roughly 2:28 in the morning established a rigid, undeniable parameter in the timeline. Although it could not broadcast geographic coordinates, it trapped the event within a terrifyingly precise temporal window, just as the unfolding drama began to ignite a firestorm of national press. Stepping into the blinding glare of the spotlight, Nancy's daughter, a prominent national broadcaster named Nancy Guthrie, leveraged her massive public reach to beg for genuine, actionable intelligence. Desperation pushed the family to put an unprecedented bounty on the truth, announcing a staggering $1 million prize for any tip that could bring their matriarch home. The Federal Bureau of Investigation threw an additional $100,000 into the pot, a tactic designed to trigger very specific psychological levers in the criminal underworld. Massive payouts are meant to shake loose reluctant witnesses and broadcast the sheer gravity of the manhunt, but they undeniably attract a suffocating level of public obsession. That intense societal gaze inevitably generates crippling amounts of static, flooding detective hotlines with a tidal wave of calls from every corner of the nation. While a handful held a ring of chilling authenticity, the vast majority were pure, unadulterated fantasy, a common plague in highly publicized investigations that easily spawn thousands of dead-end theories. Yet, the excruciating reality of police work demands every single whisper be chased down, especially when dark rumors began swirling about extortionists demanding hefty payouts in anonymous cryptocurrency. While top brass admitted they were actively monitoring these digital ransom notes, They issued stern warnings about the viral contagion of internet-born falsehoods. Opportunistic cyber scavengers frequently weaponize the tragedy of a nationally televised disappearance, launching parasitic extortion schemes that have absolutely zero connection to the real abductors. Naturally, federal specialists trained in the dark arts of cyber warfare meticulously ripped apart the architecture of any digital ledgers tied to these threats. The inherent beauty of blockchain technology is its inescapable memory. Even shrouded in heavy cryptographic anonymity, the money leaves a glowing, immutable trail. Independent sleuths and journalists later uncovered a suspiciously dormant digital vault supposedly linked to the blackmailers, exhibiting barely a flicker of financial movement. It was an anomalous breadcrumb that investigators carefully weighed against the broader evidentiary landscape, just as they pivoted to extinguish the rampant, venomous gossip surrounding Nancy's inner circle. Warrants were quietly signed and violently executed, sweeping up mountains of personal electronics while detectives subjected those closest to the victim to grueling interrogations. Seeking to quell the rising hysteria, Sheriff Chris Nanos stood before the cameras to explicitly address the status of the victim's innermost circle, specifically naming her daughter Annie and the rest of the household. He definitively stripped them of any lingering suspicion, declaring them entirely innocent following a relentlessly exhaustive background probe. Exonerating a family in the middle of a missing persons case is never a mere public relations stunt. It serves as ironclad proof that the forensic microscope has scrutinized every available fiber of their lives and found nothing. Nevertheless, the armchair detectives of the internet refused to let the narrative die, endlessly dissecting that chilling 41-minute dead zone between 1:47 and 2:28 in the morning. The authorities, meanwhile, had long since shifted their gaze away from the empty, echoing halls of the primary crime scene, casting their net deep into the surrounding shadows. Whispered leaks to the press recently hinted at a newly discovered piece of surveillance tape, capturing a phantom vehicle tearing through the neighboring streets at a dangerously high speed. Crucially, this high-speed anomaly was recorded bleeding directly into the precise, razor-thin window of the presumed abduction. While command staff have officially conceded the existence of this shadowy recording, they adamantly refuse to validate its actual significance to the plot, treating the grueling dissection of vehicular movement as just another silent, standard protocol in the hunt for a ghost. Investigators plunged into a labyrinth of traffic flow patterns, combing through automated license plate scans and grainy surveillance footage harvested from surrounding crossroads. In cases like this, the mere ghost of a vehicle caught on camera for a fraction of a second can tear a mystery wide open. A lone glove, discovered roughly 2 miles away from the crime scene, was immediately thrust into the forensic spotlight. Genetic profiling is ruthlessly accurate, but the agonizing wait for results can span weeks. A positive biological hit tethers a suspect directly to the physical evidence, while a negative result meticulously chips away at a growing mountain of false leads. As the days bled into weeks, the frenetic pulse of an active crisis gave way to a cold, methodical marathon. Yet the operational nerve center never once powered down. Analysts sat in darkened rooms, dissecting endless streams of data, triaging incoming tips based entirely on their cold, hard evidentiary value. Navigating a puzzle of this magnitude requires a delicate, often maddening tightrope walk between feeding a hungry public and protecting the fragile integrity of the hunt. Detectives are forced to scatter just enough breadcrumbs to spark civilian memories, all while guarding the critical secrets that only the true perpetrator would know. Every syllable spoken to the press was surgically calculated, maintaining an unwavering official narrative. The core belief remained chillingly static. Nancy Guthrie was dragged from her life against her will, and the hunt for her captors was far from over. The suspect board remained frustratingly blank. The gears of justice were relentlessly turning, yet they desperately required the fuel of hard evidence as the dragnet widened across state lines. Behind closed doors, the digital forensics grew increasingly sophisticated, while national broadcasts continued to beg the public for that one missing puzzle piece. Despite the massive mobilization, the darkest, most terrifying reality loomed over everything. Nancy was still out there, somewhere in the void. When a mystery outlives its initial shockwave of media hysteria, a profound shift occurs. The chaotic strobe of police cruisers eventually fades into the night. The relentless hum of news choppers dissipates, and broadcast vans roll away to chase the next tragedy. What is left in their wake is a suffocating quiet, heavily pregnant with unyielding desperation. Within a matter of weeks, the void left by Nancy Guthrie's vanishing entered this exact shadowy phase. The initial hours had been a breathless sprint against the clock. Now, the adrenaline was replaced by algorithmic precision. Detectives from the Pima County Sheriff's Department locked arms with federal authorities, pivoting from frantic street-level searches to a cold, calculated reconstruction of a nightmare. Every digital footprint, every paranoid phone call, and every grainy pixel of security video had to be relentlessly archived. Each fragment demanded rigorous authentication before being pinned to an ever-expanding master timeline of the crime. True crime consumers have been conditioned to expect sudden, theatrical breakthroughs, dramatic arrests, explosive press conferences, a face to hate. But the reality of hunting a phantom beats to a far more agonizing drum. Authorities systematically narrow the field, ruthlessly eliminate ghosts, test the impossible, and start all over again. The first major psychological shift in this dark saga happened when police stepped to the podium and definitively absolved Nancy's own flesh and blood. With those few words, they struck down the statistically highest probability in any sudden disappearance: the monster hiding inside the home. Confronting the venomous whisper campaigns head-on, Sheriff Chris Nanos firmly declared that her daughter, Annie, and the rest of her inner circle were entirely free of suspicion. This exoneration was not given lightly. It was forged through invasive property sweeps, grueling interrogations, and sweeping digital audits. While the internet sleuths continued to spin wild, baseless webs, the official investigative crosshairs swung violently in a new direction. The intimate circle was secure. The predators they were hunting were strangers in the dark. A chilling silhouette of a masked intruder had become the defining symbol of the terror, prompting detectives to blast the frozen images across every available network. Alongside rough calculations of the phantom's height, they highlighted a distinct backpack and a menacing, clearly visible weapon, knowing full well that unmasking a killer requires far more than studying a shadow. The marvels of modern facial recognition algorithms are utterly useless against a featureless void. Biomechanical tracking decoding the unique rhythm of a person's walk can occasionally crack a case, but only with pristine angles and a suspect to match it against. Forced into a corner, the hunters turned their eyes to the landscape itself. They dissected the geographic psychology of the property, mapping the predator's invisible approach, the point of breach, and the desolate asphalt arteries surrounding the trap. They scrutinized the heartbeat of early morning traffic, obsessively retracing a terrifying 41-minute window where a life was violently altered. What unspeakable acts could unfold in less than an hour? While a badge demands public silence on unproven motives, behind the crime tape, seasoned detectives wargamed every morbid scenario. Did the predator hunt Nancy by name, studying her every move? Or was her home merely a target of opportunity, chosen because it reeked of vulnerability? Were they looking for a payday, hidden secrets, or the sheer, sickening thrill of absolute control? The sudden injection of cryptic, ransom-style demands threw a complex, psychological wrench into an already convoluted puzzle. Whispers soon leaked to the press about shadowy digital currency ultimatums being tied directly to her terrifying vanishing. Yet, veteran investigators quickly sounded the alarm, warning that the gravitational pull of high-profile tragedies always attracts opportunistic parasites. It has become a sickeningly common modern trend. Anonymous vultures, entirely unconnected to the violence, weaponizing media hysteria to extort desperate families. The digital ledger of the blockchain leaves breadcrumbs that specialized cyber hunters can meticulously track. However, ripping the mask off an anonymous crypto wallet requires a perfect storm of exchange subpoenas, exposed IP addresses, or a fatal slip of human arrogance. The ghostly silence surrounding a digital wallet linked to the supposed extortionists raised massive red flags regarding its legitimacy. But in the world of life and death, an anomaly does not automatically mean a hoax. Every digital threat is treated as a loaded weapon until forensically proven empty. All the while, the physical hunt pushed far beyond the manicured lawns of her neighborhood, bleeding out into the vast, unforgiving unknown. The barren, unforgiving desert creates a profound logistical nightmare, hiding countless secrets. Navigating rugged foothills forces rescue crews into a grim triage of accessibility and probability. Nothing is left to chance. Detectives use geographic profiling to map an intruder's exact escape arteries. Experts critically dissect timelines, calculating how much ground an abductor covered before the cardiac device went dark. At precisely 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker severed its wireless link. This technological blackout implies transport far away, a haunting perimeter forensic analysts rush to quantify. By crunching terrain and getaway speeds, authorities mapped out a captor's reach within a crucial 41-minute window. A psychological puzzle piece emerged. Was the smartphone left behind while its owner was taken? Should evidence prove the device was relocated later, it completely shatters the timeline's trajectory. While the media remains blind regarding the phone's recovery location, official silence hardly equates to ignorance. It signifies a highly calculated suppression of evidence. A solitary glove resting 2 miles away provided a break. Genetic profiling binds suspects to clues, but lacks vital narrative context. Should scientists extract a viable genetic signature, they will scour vast criminal registries. A positive hit exposes a predator. A negative result forces the manhunt into dangerously unknown territory. As agonizing weeks dragged on, the digital dragnet expanded to vehicular records. Press whispers pointed to security clips, capturing a speeding car tearing through residential streets right after the presumed abduction. Officials admitted possessing this tantalizing video, cautiously stopping short of verifying it as the smoking gun. Extracting answers from pixelated motion is painstaking science, requiring technicians to scrub footage. Analysts scrutinize blurred outlines, hunting for specific manufacturing details and automotive paint. They leverage plate-reading technology, tracking transit patterns through nearby intersection surveillance arrays. When survival is measured in minutes, a fleeting 2-second glimpse of a bumper becomes absolutely critical. Meanwhile, psychological weight intensified. Savannah Guthrie relentlessly leveraged her massive television presence, broadcasting desperate pleas for legitimate leads. A lucrative bounty hung over the investigation, accompanied by carefully orchestrated tactical public statements. Deploying a massive monetary reward wasn't accidental. It served as a strategic weapon and a profound declaration. It guaranteed the story stayed in headlines, though such intense scrutiny wields a dark, double-edged blade. Blockbuster mysteries inevitably magnetize true crime forums, where armchair detectives obsessively tear apart timelines and draw wild parallels. These sleuths spin elaborate webs, forcing exhausted police to sift through mountains of digital noise. In these drawn-out nightmares, the true enemy isn't manpower shortage, but the suffocating absence of concrete truth. Frustrated agents obsess over chilling anchors. The severed security feed at 1:47, followed by the terrifying cardiac blackout at 2:28. They dissect the phantom-like intruder on tape, the mysterious knapsack, extortion demands, abandoned handwear, and the speeding car. These aren't mere rumors. Every artifact remains a certified, tangible component of the forensic puzzle. Yet, the terrifying question lingering in the dark is how these fragmented clues interlock. The inquiry demands historical perspective, recognizing that abductions targeting the vulnerable elderly operate on vastly different blueprints. A victim's fragile physiology, restricted movement, and deeply ingrained habits radically alter how profilers view the scene. Nancy was utterly reliant on a strict pharmaceutical regimen, a medical vulnerability intimately understood by her inner circle. This fragile reality turns the manhunt into a ticking clock, fundamentally changing how veteran agents calculate rescue windows. As agonizing hours bleed into days, the trail cools. The human mind plays tricks, dissolving once sharp eyewitness recollections. Hard drives systematically erase memories, and natural elements wash away footprints, making initial evidence gathering absolutely vital. Responding with military precision, officials rapidly erected a tactical hub, canvassing the community for anomalous observations. Massive search parties scoured unforgiving landscapes alongside elite federal bureaus, yet no handcuffs have been utilized. No individual faces indictment, and the official record remains chillingly blank, save for the terrifying certainty of a stolen woman. This lack of legal retribution isn't a stalled operation. It's the hallmark of meticulous, calculated restraint. Law enforcement plays a high-stakes chess game, requiring a bulletproof net of forensic proof before court. Grainy video clips and electronic chronologies are potent weapons, practically useless until definitive threads bind them to perpetrators. For a captivated public, the endless nuances of criminal procedure burn away, leaving only one haunting question: who is the monster? In true investigative work, the puzzle is ruthless. Who was there? Who possessed the perfect window? Who held the tools? Who left an invisible mark? Who physically fits the fatal timeline? Through it all, that chilling 41-minute void stands as the undeniable core, marking the exact window where a life shattered. Investigators scrutinize those precious seconds, questioning if the tight time frame points to calculated execution or unforeseen chaos. They weigh the terrifying logistics. Was this a lone predator or a synchronized operation? Another chilling variable lingers. Did the Phantom already know every hidden corner of the neighborhood? Subpoenas for older security footage paint a disturbing picture. Authorities suspect a predator was quietly watching long before. A stalker tracking her rhythms would possess intimate knowledge. They would know exactly when her car pulled in, when the house went black, and the complete blueprint of her sanctuary. Yet, lingering shadows do not hold up in court. As this phase concludes, the hunt reaches a precarious crossroads. Initial frantic desperation has morphed into a methodical war of attrition, with forensic teams firmly entrenched. Pleas to the community echo relentlessly. Nancy Guthrie anchors ongoing press conferences, keeping the active manhunt burning. True pursuits never perish when media spotlights shift. They conclude only when undeniable proof locks onto a definitive suspect. The tragedy here is a mosaic of shattered clues. Law enforcement has painstakingly verified every isolated shard, searching for hidden meaning. These pieces fit a strict chronological grid mapped to the exact second. Yet, isolated fragments cannot build the bulletproof narrative required for a conviction. Detectives require more than gut feelings. They demand an unbreakable chain. Ultimately, a human being must be anchored into that fatal timeline, using forensic facts strong enough to survive brutal legal dissection. The burden of proof is intentionally monumental. That haunting 41-minute abyss, stretching from 1:47 a.m. to 2:28 a.m., serves as the dark epicenter. The digital porch lens went blind. A medical lifeline ceased transmitting. Every theory moving forward must bridge those two chilling technological deaths. Detectives relentlessly drill into the same grim inquiries. Can cutting-edge science unmask the faceless shadow captured in the gloom? Will a discarded glove, recovered miles away, surrender a microscopic genetic secret? Can grainy vehicular captures be mathematically clarified to reveal a make or license digit? Will phantom electronic footprints tethered to extortion threats finally unmask a breathing human? Could archived security feeds expose a meticulous stalking ritual or a sinister trial run? Navigating this labyrinth demands clinical exactness, leaving cyber analysis as the beating heart of the manhunt. Today's justice system no longer relies on flawed human memory. Silent machines hoard the undeniable truth within hidden code. Surveillance lenses burn chronological markers into files, while passing cars trigger automated intersection eyes that never sleep. Should the perpetrator have carried a mobile device near the hunting ground, cellular triangulations could dramatically shrink the suspect pool. Even if dark web funds finance this nightmare, digital ledgers carve every financial movement into the unalterable stone of cyberspace. Yet, immortal footprints do not equal instant gratification. Unearthing that architecture demands legal subpoenas, corporate compliance, and agonizing patience. Biological science operates under punishing constraints. Genetic sequencing is deliberately methodical. A definitive profile must be absolutely unshakable for a jury. Fragmented biological whispers simply cannot be forced to accelerate. As grueling scientific wheels turn, the manhunt burns intensely forward under Sheriff Chris Nanos, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and the looming presence of the FBI. Desperate broadcasts for tips echo endlessly. Savannah Guthrie navigates the public spotlight, articulating her mother's vanishing with calculated, heartbreaking precision. A lucrative bounty hangs in the balance, tethered to an unwavering plea. Authentic, verified intelligence is the only currency that matters. When mysteries deepen, detectives are drawn back to the epicenter, silently tracing their steps across the very ground where the nightmare unfolded. Hypotheses are brutally tested against unyielding architecture. They calculate spatial gaps and scrutinize the exact vantage points yielding those grainy frames. Occasionally, the pivotal revelation does not materialize from freshly discovered clues. Rather, it emerges from staring into existing files until a radically different perspective snaps into focus. Psychological profiling inevitably creeps back in. Analysts dissect the stealthy advance, the tools carried into the dark, and the chilling choice to blind the security lens. Even the exact second of escape speaks volumes. Standing alone, these anomalies seem mundane, but layered together, they manifest a terrifying psychological blueprint. Should this web finally ensnare a culprit, the takedown will be executed in deafening silence. Initial grand jury documents will almost certainly be locked away. Raids will strike from the shadows without warning. Any resulting legal fury would be fueled by an impenetrable mountain of facts, far beyond one blurry photograph. Pending that inevitable dawn, an ironclad veil of secrecy and caution governs every official word. To this day, Nancy Guthrie is a ghost. No breathing soul has been formally accused, named, or shackled in relation to her, vanishing as current briefings conclude. The dark pursuit grinds onward. Riddles of this magnitude severely strain the collective endurance of an unsettled community. They shatter loved ones and drain the detectives forced to shoulder agonizing mysteries, constantly battling the dangerous urge to let rumors masquerade as facts. Yet, the annals of modern crime dictate one inescapable truth. Time can never truly wash away the electronic stains left in the dark. A shadow over a lens cannot wipe away biology or movement. It merely forces investigators to become ruthless. That 41-minute void is the chilling epicenter of this mystery, the single terrifyingly concrete time frame left to dissect. At 1:47 in the morning, the surveillance feed died. By 2:28, a human pacemaker flatlined. Trapped within that narrow abyss is the catalyst that twisted a quiet night into a sprawling manhunt. Was this an orchestrated ambush or a spontaneous attack? The truth remains buried in the dark. It is still completely unknown if the Phantom acted alone or utilized unseen accomplices. Extortion messages might be genuine threats or cruel bluffs. Yet, one chilling fact is absolute. Nancy Guthrie was forcibly abducted. Her relatives are cleared. Meanwhile, the ghostly figure on the security footage drifts without a public identity. The gears of justice grind silently. To make an arrest, detectives require a perfect intersection of clues. Microscopic biology directly tethering the scene to a living suspect. A getaway machine legally bound to a tangible paper trail. Unmasked digital accounts, or a brave voice stepping forward with testimony anchored by physical truth. Once those fragments lock together, this speculative timeline violently pivots into a ruthless pursuit of justice. Until then, this tragedy stands as a cold monument to modern police work fueled by raw data and agonizing patience, not assumptions. Nancy Guthrie is not forgotten. Her file remains a glaring priority for federal agents. Her disappearance is an open wound, and those 41 sinister minutes continue mocking those fighting to solve it. Anyone harboring genuine knowledge must contact Pima County authorities or federal agents. Hard facts, not internet speculation. Break deadlocks. For truth, stripped of baseless hysteria, stay closely tethered to our ongoing coverage. We dissect unfolding mysteries with surgical precision, presenting strictly what withstands the harsh light of reality. Share critical insights below. We seek clinical observations forged by the timeline and forensic realities laid bare. Often, the most microscopic anomaly unravels a monster's plan. Nancy's file is still breathing. Until the handcuffs click shut, this relentless hunt will never sleep.